Hi everyone, my name is Rajesh and this one is the last video in our series of Microsoft Excel for ERP consultants. So far in this series, we have covered 4 different videos. In our first video in our this series, we covered these 2 features which are find and replace and sort and filter. So if you want to know more about these features, I'm giving the link of the first video over here. You can go back and check that video. In the second video in this series, we covered these 3 features: paste spatial, data validation, and remove duplicate and conditional formatting. Again, I'm giving the link over here. You can go back and check that out if you are interested to see how these 3 features work. In the third video in this series, we covered some of the basic formulas. For example, sum, average. So these are the mathematical operation. There are if, trim, upper, lower, proper, concatenate. These are some more non-mathematical or logical data operations that you can perform with these formulas. So if you are interested to learn these formulas, I'm giving the link of that video over here. You can go back and check that video first and then come back to this particular video. In our last video, which we released on last Sunday, we covered these 2 features, text to column and Vlookup. So we took some of the use cases wherein we explained how exactly the text to column and Vlookup can be used. So if you are interested to know more about that, I'm giving the link of that 4th video over here. You can go back and check that particular video. In this final video in this series, we are going to cover these 2 features. One is pivot table. Another one is formatting discipline. Now, formatting discipline per se is not a feature of Microsoft Excel, but I feel that it is one of the most neglected points when it comes to Microsoft Excel data processing. And that is where I'm going to include that also in this series of video. So with that, let's begin with the first feature, which is pivot table. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to this particular sheet, and in the insert menu over here, you will find this option called pivot table. Now pivot in English means a point around which the things move. So if you think about a data set like this, wherein you have got a data of a bunch of trainees, which are part of different batches and who have secured different grades. Now, if you want to analyze something like how many students in which batch have secured which grade, so these kind of data operations can be handled using the pivot table feature. So within this insert menu, I'll find this pivot table menu. And as soon as I click on that, I'll get this particular dialog box wherein I'll need to specify some of the components of the pivot table. Now, the first thing that I need to specify is which table or range from which I need to generate this pivot. So what I can simply do is I can again go back to this basic formula table, and then here I can select the relevant data set or relevant table from which I want to generate this pivot. And the second thing what I need to specify is where do I want to place this particular pivot table. So I want to place it not in the new worksheet, but in the existing worksheet, which is named as pivot table in cell number A1. So once I'm done with this, I just need to click OK. And this will create a pivot table area over here. And on the right hand side, it will give me the list of all the columns that are available in my original data set or in my table. And here there are 4 different areas in which I can drag this particular columns and I can analyze my data effectively. So the areas that are most important out of these 4 are these 3. One is column, one is row, and one is values. Now again, going back to the data set that we were talking about. Now let's assume that what I want to analyze first is out of my 15 trainees that are a part of 3 different batches, how many trainees in which batch have secured what kind of grade out of grade A, grade B, and grade C. Now, how do I do that? So first of all, I may have, like, if I imagine the table or if I imagine this particular analysis, it may come out something like this, that on my rows, I have the batches like batch 1, batch 2, batch 3. On my columns, I might have like grade A, grade B, grade C. And then I may want a intersection of both of these rows and columns wherein how many students in batch A have secured grade A, grade B, and grade C. Then how many students in batch B have secured grade A, grade B, and grade C, and so on, right? So that kind of analysis I want to build. So it's pretty simple. Like I can simply drag and drop this batch column in my rows. I can drag and drop this grade column in my grade field in my columns, and then in my values I may have the count of names or the count of grades or the count of batch, anything can do. So I'll bring names over here. Okay, and that's it. So if you can see over here the pivot table that has got created out of this data set, so you can see that exact same analysis, that out of batch 1, one student had secured grade A, one student had secured grade B, one student had secured grade C, and then the total students that were available in batch 1 were 5, and similarly batch 2 and batch 3. So this is how you can use the basic functionalities of the pivot table. Now there are certain additional things also. So for example, I want to sort by this particular total. Now here, like all the total columns have got the similar number like 5, 5 and 5. But suppose that if I want to sort it by this particular column, then I can simply click over here and sort smallest to largest or largest to smallest. So if I do largest to smallest, it will sort the data based on whatever column I have selected, whatever value column I have selected. The sort may not be available over here, but the sort will ideally be needed to be done logically either based on my this column or my this column, right? And then there is one more feature which is around the filter. So let's assume that I do not want to see the data analysis like this, grade A, grade B and grade C, but I just want to see the data of the students that are there in batch 1, batch 2 and batch 3. So in order to get that field list again, I can simply right click anywhere on the table and say that I need to see the field list. So I'll click on show field list, and here I'll get that field list back. And as I said, I do not want the grade in the column over here. So I'll just put the grade away, or rather I'll drag out the grade from the columns area. And now what I want is I want the grade as a filter. Now let us see how does that work. So if I put the grade as a filter, so then all my batch 1, batch 2 and batch 3 counts, or batch 1, batch 2 and batch 3 total number of students are visible over here, and this is the data for all grades. But now if I want to see that how many of them are for grade A only, then I can simply come to this filter and select grade A and click OK. Now this will show me that out of batch 1 there is one person, and out of batch 2 there is one person who has secured grade A. Similarly, I can go and look for grade B, or I can go and look for grade C, and so on and so forth, right? So that's how you can make use of the filter. So this pivot table feature is very flexible. So if I want to do it this way, that now I want my batches to be in the column and my grades to be in the row, then I can do that as well. So what I can do is I can bring the grades over here, I can put the batches in the column, and in the values I can still have the count of names. So if you notice, essentially what we are doing over here is you are keeping a central point, which is your data or which is your data set. And around that central point, you can actually manipulate or analyze or plot that data in any which manner you want. And that is the crux of pivot table. Now, what we are going to see is the last feature, or rather, as I said, it's not a feature. It is the discipline that you should be maintaining in Microsoft Excel data processing. Now let me show you this last sheet once, and then you yourself will realize that what exactly is wrong in this particular sheet. So if I come to this formatting discipline sheet, so you can see a number of anomalies in this particular sheet. The first issue is like your font size is not equal. Second thing is like there are font colors that are disparate. Then there are alignments that are not proper. Or let's say there are merged cells, there is italic used somewhere, there is bold used somewhere. So this is how, if you are presenting the data, then ideally nobody would like to see that particular data. And that's where the formatting discipline comes into picture. So what I'm going to do in front of you is I'm just going to rectify this particular data. And in that process, you will realize how exactly the formatting should look like in a typical Excel data set that you are presenting to someone. So the first thing to do is to regularize the font sizes. So for that, you can select the entire sheet, and whatever font size you feel appropriate, you can simply select that font size. And then you will see that all the fonts or all the data has been realigned to that particular font size. Now again, Same thing goes with your font name also. So you can simply select the entire data set and select a font name so as to make sure that all the data has got the similar font. That is another important thing. Now, the next important thing is the font color, as I said. So I'll again select the entire data, and then so there could be two types of colors basically. One color is the fill color and the another color is the font color. So here what I want to rectify is I do not want to have these text in the red font color, and that's where I simply select the entire sheet and I select the font color as automatic. That will simply turn my font color into black, a uniform font color. Now the next thing is around the column width. So you can see that like for this one, the column width is unnecessarily short, or rather extraordinarily short, and this one it is extraordinarily high width. So I do not want it to have this way. So how can I regularize the column width is, again, I can select the entire sheet and simply going between any two columns and double clicking on the columns. What that will do is that will sort of regularize the column width for all the columns together. You do not need to do it individually for every column. Now, there is one more anomaly that you can see, and these are very, very small points that many of you won't even notice. However, when you are presenting the data, these things matter the most in order to make your data look professional. And that's where. So here you can see that the batch one. So if you analyze these two cells closely, now vertically speaking, your batch one is at the mid of the cell, but your value 1 in your cell C3 is at the bottom of the cell. So for that, you can again select the entire sheet and change this particular alignment. So here you will find two different alignments. So this alignment that you can see in the lower half or in the lower line, this is for horizontal alignment. So I do not want to right now change the horizontal alignment, but I want to change the vertical alignment. Now these signs that are given are self-explanatory. Now, in most of the data, or like, it is considered a good practice to have it center aligned vertically. So as soon as I center aligned everything vertically, you can see that Excel automatically corrected the cell width also, or the row width also. And now look how neat and clean your data is looking like. However, there are still few more things to do. So one of those things is the horizontal alignment. So far we have seen the vertical alignment and we have adjusted the vertical alignment to center. But now when we talk about the horizontal alignment, ideally it should depend upon your data type. The thumb rules over here are, if it is a text data type, then ideally it should have the left alignment. So this one is my text data, right? And that is where I want to have a left alignment for this. If it is text data, but then it is fairly uniform, for example, like, batch 1 to batch 3. Now, if you look at the character lengths of this entire column, then those are fairly uniform character length. And here, even the center alignment would work. So I can simply say that this I want to be center aligned. So in case of your text, either it should be left aligned. So if the character length is different, for example, here you can see that trainee 1 and trainee 15, the character length is different. So if I keep it center aligned, it may not look proper. Rather, I can better keep it left aligned. Then in the batch, I have kept it center aligned. Whenever there is a number, it is always better to either keep it center aligned or to keep it right aligned. Okay. Now, if it is typically a value or an amount that you are entering, for example, in this column, then the amount always needs to be in the right aligned format. It should never be center aligned. It should never be left aligned. The amount should always appear in the right aligned format. There is also one more small formatting that is needed for the amount, which is this number type of formatting, which is shown as comma style in your Excel menu ribbon, right? So if I select this comma style, then just closely pay attention what has happened. So it has rectified how my amount is shown. So it has shown my amount now with comma, which is also called 1000 separator, by the way, and the decimal point, and then two values after decimal point. This is the neat and clean way how you can show or how you can present the amount in your Excel data. And when there are numbers which are not amounts, for example, in this data set, I have the score As I mentioned previously, you can either keep them right aligned or you can keep them center aligned. Here, since it's just a one digit number that is appearing in all these cells or all these columns, I would rather prefer to keep them center aligned. Now, there is one more thing which is about the heading or the header row of the table. Now, ideally speaking, header row should always be bold. That is one thing, right? The second thing, header row should always be center aligned, irrespective of how your table data look like. Like as I said, if your table data is text, then you should rather keep it left aligned, but that's not applicable for the header row. So in case of header row, you should rather keep it center aligned, right? Then the second thing is around the merged cells that you have. So here, for example, you have a merged cell. Here, for example, you have a merged cell. Now, what happens or what's the problem with this merged cell is that if you want to put the filter on your data, that filter you may not be able to apply properly. For example, if I go to data and if I try to put the filter over here, the filter will come in this particular row, first of all, which is correct. But if I try to bring the filter, or if I try to, let's say, get the filter on this particular column, right, then it may not work properly because my batch 3 is sort of merged cell. So if I try to get the filter as batch 3, as you can see, it's just showing me one row. But ideally speaking, in my batch 3, I have 5 or 6 different rows, right? So all of those rows were not visible to me in my filter just because I have this merge cell. And that is where, if you are not going to use this data set to print on a piece of paper, then ideally in all circumstances, you should avoid the merge cell. So what to do to avoid the merge cell? You can simply unmerge this particular cell. So you can come back to home, and over here, you can see this merge and center. You can click on it again and this will get unmerged. Then again, there is something called format painter. So what is this format painter? Now, for example, my batch 3 has got a different formatting. So if you can observe, it is bold, it is in italic, it may have a different font, it may have a different font size or color. Now, I don't want to change all of this individually one by one. What I simply want is I want my batch 3 to look like my batch 2. And that's where I can simply have my cursor selected in batch 2. I can click on this format painter, and now you can just observe what is or how exactly my mouse sign is looking. And I can simply click on that destination cell where I want to apply this formatting. And that's it. Now you can see that my batch 3 exactly looks like my batch 2. That's how you make use of format painter. And now what I can do is I can simply copy these fields or copy this batch 3 and paste it over here. There is one more thing that I can do with this particular data, which is my borders are not looking consistent over here. So you can see that my first 4 or 5 columns have got the borders, but in my last column, I do not have the border. And that's where I can simply select that entire set and I can go to my borders, and over here, I can select all borders as an option. Now just look at this data that we have, which is a well formatted data versus the original data that you have. And you yourself can get the difference. So this is all about making your data look more professional. And this is very neglected part when it comes to the Excel data processing. So I hope that with this series of Microsoft Excel for the ERP consultants, you have gained some better insights in terms of processing the data or using the Microsoft Excel more effectively. Thank you everyone for watching this video. With the advent of cloud, the ERP solutions are becoming more and more affordable. And that's where even the small and mid-scale organizations are increasingly opting for ERP softwares. What it means for us is ERP consulting as a career option is now more lucrative than ever. So if you are a fresher finance, commerce and management graduate and want to build your career in the ERP consulting industry, then go visit www.yourerpcoach.com and hit that inquire button right now.